Hello everyone, it's your Peacekeeper, and it is time for the first video in our How to Play series on the Russian cruiser line. This is actually going to be the Captain Skills video, and like all the other Captain Skills video, I'm going to preface this by saying, by no means are these Captain Skill builds that I'm about to present to you the exhaustive end-all be-all of Captain Skills. They are merely there to give you an idea of how to build your own captain so that it might better suit your playstyle rather than just copying and pasting my playstyle. There is some important things to talk about when it comes to the Russian cruisers and how their captain skills work out. They're a bit odd in that IFHE is basically required all the way to tier 9, and then at tier 10 it's useless. So, we'll talk a little bit more about that. The three builds that I'm going to be recommending, we're going to have kind of this balanced build, which is going to give us a good mix of survivability and anti-aircraft capabilities, as well as some offensive capabilities. An anti-aircraft build, and then a full-on survivability build. And survivability build is, obviously going to be in reference to cruiser survivability. It is going to be kind of useful at the higher tiers. Mosvka is an extraordinarily tanky cruiser, and I could definitely see a survivability build working out for him. So we will go ahead and we will look at our Mosvka captain. This first build that I'm going to recommend is kind of a balanced build, and it's going to focus around some core elements here. While my Mosvka captain is not a, high point captain, well, he's 15, but while he's not 19 points, just pretend that I have all 19 points here. So the first one I'm going to take, you're going to either look at either preventative maintenance for the 30% reduction in the chance of your modules being incapacitated. That's your main guns, your rudder, your engine, or expert loader, which is going to reduce the time it takes to switch between shell types if the main battery is loaded by 50%. I've taken expert loader on Mosvka. However, preventative maintenance is probably more useful from, basically tier 1 on to tier 9. The nice part about the 155s and the 180s is that they do have a pretty quick reload, so expert loader is less of a value. From there, we're going to go to expert marksman, which is going to allow these ships to more effectively kite. This is going to increase the speed at which the guns traverse by, 0.7 degrees per second, which I don't know what that number is. Basically, it's going to make them traverse faster. So that's a useful skill even on a cruiser. It just allows you to get your guns on target that much quicker. From there, I am running Demolition Expert. This is going to increase the chance of setting a fire by 2%. This skill is extremely useful for basically all of them, and it just allows them to be the little fire burners, the little blow torches that they are. The Russian cruisers do start fires very well, and their AP is kinda meh until you get all the way up to tier 10. Once you hit tier 10, the AP becomes really strong. So I've run Demolition Expert there. From there, I'm going to go with IFHE, unless you are tier 10. If you are at Mosvka, I would take Concealment Expert over IFHE, but from tier 1 to tier 9, IFHE is the skill you're going to want to run. IFHE increases the armor penetration of your HE shells by 30%, and it's going to decrease the chance of you starting a fire by 3%, so Demolition Expert kind of helps offset this a little bit. This is extremely important because it allows the 155s to penetrate most battleship hull plating and their superstructure. and that's extremely important. The 180s, they struggle from this a little bit less, but I found that they're a little bit more reliable in dealing damage with IFHE than without. So IFHE important all the way up until tier 9, in my opinion. At tier 10, switch to Concealment Expert, which is going to drop the detection range of a cruiser by 12%. From there, depending on where you're at, so if you are tier 1 through 9, I would then recommend you take Concealment Expert after IFHE. If you are in Mosvka, you already have Concealment Expert, then I would recommend Advanced Firing Training. This is going to boost your AA gun and your secondary battery range by 20%, and this is more for the AA than the secondaries, but if we pull up the ship parameters here, you can actually see the secondary battery on Mosvka has 8.2 kilometer range. So, not completely useless. I can almost see a secondary build make sense. Just kidding. From there, I'm going to recommend Superintendent for, at the higher tiers, the extra heal, the extra radar. At the lower tiers, the extra hydro or defensive fire. This is a very important skill when it comes to dealing with destroyers especially, so that's why I recommend running this. From there, it's going to go to the Ye Ol Standby Adrenaline Rush, which is going to decrease the reload of your guns by 0.2% for every 1% of your hit points lost. Very, very good skill to have. As you take damage, your rate of fire goes up, which means your damage output also goes up. And when it comes to Mosvka, and well, really any cruiser, you have a tendency to lose your hit points fairly easily. Part of that's because battleships are extremely lethal. The other part of that is because as the game progresses on and on, you will be tanking damage as well, and especially in Mosvka. So that's the balance build. This next build is going to be an anti-aircraft build, and it's going to start off very similarly. It's going to go Expert Loader Preventative Maintenance for the same reasons. Then Expert Marksman, and it's going to go to Superintendent for the extra defensive fire consumable. From there, it's going to go to Advanced Firing Training for the increase in your AA gun firing range, then to Manual Fire Control for AA, which this doubles the DPS of any of your anti-aircraft guns that are 85 millimeters or larger. For our 4 dual 130 millimeters on Mosvka, this takes its DPS up to 224, doubling it, which is very potent, especially given the fact that that is 6.8 kilometers in range that those guys kick in. From there, we're going to pick up Basic Firing Training, and Basic Firing Training is going to increase your AA DPS by 20%. This is a huge boost to your anti-aircraft capabilities. And then from there, we're going to go to Adrenaline Rush. So you can see that this build sacrifices Demolition Expert and Concealment Expert for Manual Fire Control for AA and Basic Firing Training. This last build that I'm going to recommend or talk about is a survivability build. And this build is focused almost entirely upon ship survivability. So there's going to be a lot of aspects of this ship of this build that are going to be oriented towards bringing consumables up quicker. Specifically, your heal at the higher tier, specifically your damage control party to instantly repair. So this is going to start off with preventative maintenance. Very important skill for survivability, in my opinion. It's then going to go to High Alert. And this is going to decrease the reload time of your damage control party by 10%. From there, it's going to go to Superintendent for the extra heal at tier 9 and 10. From there, Concealment Expert, because concealment is one of the more important aspects of ship survivability, in my opinion. It allows you to disengage. From there, we've got a couple of different choices that we could take. Fire Prevention is going to be interesting, although really not all that useful on this. So we've got some other options that we could take. We could ditch that skill for something like Basics of Survivability or Vigilance, or we could go ahead and take AFT again to get our AA firing range all the way out. Personally, I would take Advanced Firing Training if I was building a survivability build, just so I've got that AA In the rare case that you do run into a carrier, it's extremely useful to have that. Plus, it does boost your secondary range out to 8.6k, which on a cruiser is insane. From there, basics of survivability again, minus 15% to the time it takes to recover from a module being incapacitated or from being set on fire or having a flood on you. And then from there, Jack of all trades, which is going to reduce the reload time of all of your consumables by 5%. Now, fire on board cruisers has been made a lot less of a threat than it would be on a battleship, but it's still important to be able to bring back, to mitigate as much damage as you possibly can. And this just allows you to utilize your consumables a little bit quicker. Especially if you combine this with the flag that also reduces the reload time of your consumables, this will also help. Now, there are a couple of skills that we kind of briefly touched on or flat out ignored. A lot of people are going to say that priority target on a cruiser is an extremely important skill, and to an extent, I can understand that mentality. As you progress in this game, I find that skills like priority target, an incoming fire alert, priority target, which just tells you how many ships are actively targeting you. Incoming fire alert just warns you if there are shells that are coming at you that have a 6-second or longer flight time. It's going to be pretty obvious when ships are shooting at you, and you'll get used to it to the point where incoming fire alert's not useful. As for ships targeting you, I pretty much assume that if I'm detected, I'm probably getting shot at. If I'm detected and I can't see something that's shooting at me, that means that there's a destroyer and I need to WASD. So for me, priority target is a little bit less of an important skill, but it might be an important skill for you. Similar vein to vigilance, this is going to increase the acquisition range of torpedoes for you, which means you're going to spot them sooner. If you have hydroacoustic search consumable activated, it also works on that. That can be an important skill as well if you're not used to anticipating where torpedoes might be coming from. This might give you just a little bit extra warning to go ahead and spot those torpedoes before they impact you, and that can really pay dividends to avoiding them, especially with ships with long rudder shift times like Mosvka. Last stand. This really isn't all that useful on cruisers, especially not on some semi-battle cruiser-esque ships like Mosvka, where losing your engine or steering gears, usually you have a damage control party available right away, so it's less important, in my opinion, to have last stand. This just allows you to, continue to move and steer at reduced rates, even if your engines or rudders get taken out. And really, I really don't find this to be all that useful of a skill. So that's kind of some of my ideas for the Russian cruisers. Again, the big difference here between Mosvka and other cruisers in this line, specifically all of them except for Mosvka, is switching advanced firing training for IFHE and the order in which you take your tier 4 skills. If you are in a tier 1 through tier 10 and you have 10 points, your 4 points, I highly recommend IFHE, inertial fuse for HE shells. It's just going to allow you to be that much more comfortable dealing damage to the ships that you can see. Without it, you can still do damage. You're going to be relying a lot on fires. The HE shell pen is not all that reliable, even for, it's the same, I guess, as all other 6-inch guns and 180mm guns, but it doesn't feel like the ship does any damage when you don't have IFHE. This just allows you to get through some of the thicker armors that you will see, especially if up-tiered. And then, of course, on Mosvka, it's really not all that important because, Russian 220mm railguns do not need IFHE, especially since the AP is so ridiculous. So anyway, I hope these kind of give you guys some ideas. Again, this isn't meant to be an exhaustive list of captain skills for Russian cruisers, merely something to give you an idea of, how you can take your own captain skills and build them up for you. If any of this was helpful for you, leave a comment down in the comment section, like if you haven't, and subscribe if you haven't, and thank you for watching.